Where have all the metalheads gone? Well, most of them have gone nowhere, choosing to stick with their physical media choice, typically CD and vinyl. Although some have gone to various platforms, most of which don't use Spotify, surprisingly enough. And as for why we don't see many new metalheads, young and old, most of them are discouraged from doing so. So, with all that said, hello and welcome. I'm Neko AV, and you just heard the short of what I'm going to say in this video. As for the long, I'm not going to go too long into it. Like several other people already said some things and said some very interesting things. And as you can see from the title, it's going to be me disagreeing with Rick Beato and other people. And the guy in the image there is not the other people I'm going to talk about because of a certain point that was brought up. Now, to get at it, first and foremost, I'm not going to be pedantic about whether or not something counts as metal. This is all about high intensity and aggressive music. And one of the more interesting things that I've seen, and I know I'm going to get into topics that a lot of people are not going to like, but like there are other places that aggressive and intense music can be found. Okay, now that I'm feeling a lot better and didn't realize my cold had caused a lot of interference with the video, so I'm redoing the rest of it, along with some extra things I found. So before I get into what I was going to get into, I'm going to talk about a couple of people who did react to Rick as well as his friend Mike, which is A. Levy of URM Academy and Mitch Patty. And both have said interesting things. Talk about Mitch first, and talk about how kids these days, they are into metal, and there's a lot who are into the metal, into the aggressive music. So yeah, there's that, and him being a school teacher is around a lot of younger metalheads. Also made me realize that there is in fact a growing community that even I didn't realize. So there is that. And as for with A.O. Levy, he pointed out a lot of things that I do agree with, which I'm definitely going to get into, such as the fact that metalheads have also went into other industries. You know, good examples. A good example would be anime. You know, you got such as with Dragon Ball Z, for example, as said by Analinga. I can't really read it well with this small screen there. In which case, you have people who are metal fans who decided that when it was ported to Western audiences, to incorporate metal music as part of the background, which got more people into metal music. Likewise, there's also a lot of animations that are focused on metal as well, with the most well-known being Metalocalypse, which is a parody with a fictional band Death Clock, which I will admit, I will say has some great music. Do have one of the Death Clock CDs. Definitely a purchase that I absolutely loved. So there is that. But just the same, there is also the fact that, let's see, here we go. There's also people who either, there's also other people who not only get into animation, but also gets influenced by it. You got Sim and Maximum the Hormone, who have contributed their metal music to anime. What's Up People, good track to start an anime with, as well as The Rumbling, given what goes on at that point in Attack on Titan. And of course got Oakley Dokley, who obviously are more of a, what some may call a novelty band, but they are still as metal gets. You know, obviously having an aesthetic that matches the cartoon character Ned Flanders. You know, hence the name Oakley Dokley, which was Flanders' catchphrase. And another thing that A.O. Levy had pointed out was also how it's not just mute animation. You also have like movies, sporting events. Some people even in his comment section brought up pro wrestling. You know, got people either into metal who brought that into the scene, as well as those who are into the scene being introduced to metal. And like I said, not just metal, but also aggressive music in general. And surprisingly enough, we also see that with video games. Some examples here, like Sonic the Hedgehog, Devil May Cry, Metal Gear, in which case Metal Gear Rising, and a game called Metal Hellsinger, which actually features Surge from System of a Down. So you also have people who do metal and other intense music who get into these projects. And how does it sound? Well, I have a few clips to show on that. Now, I know what some people are going to say about that, which is that, well, there's all sorts of sound effects that's going to distract from the music. That may be true, but that doesn't stop people who have an interest in the music, who get drawn into the music, from seeking out what this music is. And not only that, but some also are influenced to do their own music, as shown here. Got people who do stuff in their homemade studios, such as what's seen with game metal. Have people who are knee deep into the metal, such as with Silver Bullet's song for Soul Reaver. Although I don't know if the Soul Reaver remakes features their song. I should look into that. And then of course got Nathan Sharp with one of his many Five Nights at Freddy's songs, as well as Unlucky Morpheus, who started off with influenced by the game series Toho Project, and then went out to do more original music. But I would still say that the stuff that's influenced by the games, where they interpolate what is within the games for their music, comes out strong and impressive. And surprisingly enough, people like these also do get hired to create soundtracks. Now, one thing I do want to get into is about the whole mention of numbers that Rick went into. And I do understand his points of like referencing Spotify, after all, at least according to Google's AI. Although these numbers seem a bit more inflated since the last time I checked these numbers. But compared to Apple Music, Spotify has 602 million monthly active users, and so if only like 10 million, 20 million are listening to metal, then okay, I can understand that, listen to metal, aggressive music and stuff like that. But at the same time, that's only 602 million. 602 million, which sounds like a lot, except that compared to the overall population of the world, which is, last I checked, was was something like 2 billion, 20 billion, something like that. There's a whole lot of people who just don't use Spotify, which is why with what I had saved from the previous recording, when I said how, yeah, there's a lot more people out there who just don't use Spotify, because there's still people who go to gigs. There are still people who go to, since there's a lot of metal bands and other intense music, people do intense music, who also do live shows, selling out arena tours and stuff like that. So that's where a lot of metalheads are going. They wait for that, still listen to their physical media, not bothering with Spotify, especially with what Spotify is becoming rather infamous for these days. So more and more people are turning away from Spotify. But at the same time, still, 20 million listeners, 10 million listeners, that's still a huge number, you know? And considering that, well, it's hard to say that metal is dying or anything like that. Of course, though, the vibe is different, which is why I'm going to make reference to Mike, you know? But I do think that there's a bit more than that, you know? And obviously, with everything I said about animation and video games and blah, 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 obviously it talked about, already went into the vibe of what gets younger people into metal and stuff like that. But there's also another thing that's interesting. From the channel Hip Hop Madness, they're not even trying to hide it anymore. Talk about how the numbers when it comes to music can easily be inflated. Stuff we don't see metal do, but we do see other genres do. And of course, with Taylor Swift in the thumbnail there, I mean, excellent example, seeing how she did release that one CD with, like, what is it, like a dozen different albums. So those who are collectors, they're going to buy the same CD 12 times to get every single album art, which is going to in turn increase the numbers that probably would make the music seem a lot more relevant than what it is, when the fact is it could just be collectors doing what collectors do, you know. And other interesting things that's been done in the music industry that can easily inflate numbers. I strongly advise watching that video. Actually, I'm going to start putting links again in the description, or put a playlist together of what I'm talking about. But yeah, a lot of these inflated numbers can, when you compare to other music genres, does seem smaller. But even within the same genre, like artists who are within the same genre can still seem a lot smaller than someone like Taylor Swift, because of these inflated numbers by such things like multiple different cover arts for the same CD. You know, stuff like that is a thing. Now, a lot of this can be discouraging. And there's also a lot of people with negative attitudes. And while I was going to do a segment on this, I don't think it's necessary, because, like I said, some of the people who reacted talked about how there is this healthy growth. So while there is some people who would discourage others from getting into music, at the same time, there's so many different gateways to this music that creates even more metalheads than even I'm aware of, that I honestly don't think it's going anywhere, you know? It's a different vibe, different scene for sure, but it is what it is. And yeah, that's it for the video. So I am Neko AV, of course, with a new model, and well, update of my old model. And I thank you for watching. Okay, so one more thing, because of certain things I noticed with the editing. If for some reason people are confused with the examples I give, Nightmare did exist before the game, but just that the people who did the game want that song in the soundtrack, so there you goes. And with Total Spell Bubble, that's basically a love letter to the community. So songs from the fans get put into that game, but just the same, there are other games where people within the community get to contribute to the soundtrack. So there is that. I'm also going to make mention of VTubers there, because a lot of them do also create some heavy songs, you know. It's not just pop idol stuff that they do. Of course, some of which do game covers, such as with 115, and then there's those who contribute to anime soundtracks, which is what Crunchyroll shared with Mori Calliope's contribution to anime. So that's it for this, and once again, thank you for watching.